All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Community Marriage Initiative's monthly training event. And it's so awesome to see all your smiling faces. I can't help but feel joy when I look around the room and I just see all these faces of people who are passionate about cultivating strong marriages. It's so amazing to be a part of this. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Stephanie Altmans. And I've had the pleasure of being a part of the Marriage Initiative team for the past 3 months. And during this time, I've had the opportunity to connect with many of you through our monthly calls. And I just want to say that it's been so incredible to see the diverse range of gifts and experiences and knowledge that each of you bring to the table. You really are a great group of people, and I am so honored to be able to be a part. And when you think about it, when you combine all of your amazing qualities along with the blessings and the favor of God, we have the power to transform lives and create lasting change in the marriage space all across the US. That to me is really exciting. So I just want you all to know that it's truly an honor to be surrounded by such an exceptional network of people. And before we get started today, I wanted to welcome Jim with Friends of the Family Ministries in Linn-Benton, Oregon, to open us in prayer. So Jim, whenever you are ready.
Hey, thanks for y'all being here today. Today we've tried to do this for a couple months, and it's for various reasons hadn't happened. So I'm excited to finally have this take place. I do serve as program director for Friends of the Family. It's in Corvallis, and we serve Linn-Benton counties here in Oregon. So, and we're thankful for all of you and what you do. As we pray today, probably many of you have heard, but a dear member of God's family was promoted to glory today. Tim Keller, if you are not aware of that, went to his reward. And so I'm just thankful for that man. Never met him, but he has influenced millions of people that he won't meet till glory. So, but that's on my mind today. So let's pray. Father God, thank you that you are a God that cares about every part of our lives, and that you bring people into our lives to influence us and to shape us and to make us into the people that you want us to be. And Tim Keller was certainly one of those who spoke with clarity of thought and devotion to you and biblical theology. And so, Father, that on one hand, I feel like the church is losing an important voice. And yet, at the other hand, we rejoice in the fact that you say the gates of hell won't prevail against your church. And so we are thankful for the people that you're raising up even now that we don't know, that will join those ranks that give clarity. And this morning, Father, I want to pray for 2 men in particular that join us, for Dennis and for Carl, both men that I've not met in person, but just the way that you have touched their lives and you have encouraged them and honored them to lead and begin and found this movement that we believe is from you to impact your creation, marriage, the thing that you created. So, Father, we pray that as we, in each of our own locations, strive to help people as they struggle in this fallen world with their marriage and their marriage relationships, we pray for wisdom, which you promise to give to us. So we humbly ask today, once again, that in this meeting, that we would hear from you and that you would direct us and give wisdom to everyone that's on this call into what they need for this day and this season to serve you, to bring honor and glory to you through helping develop and improve godly marriages. And I just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for your prayer, Jim. We really appreciate that. Our first speaker today is Mr. Dennis Stoica. And as many of you know, Dennis is the founder and one of the funders of the CMI Fund. And he is one of the most respected leaders in the relationship and marriage education field. And Dennis will be speaking today on Marriage Enrichment Ministries. So Dennis, whenever you are ready.
Okay, so the title of the presentation is, short version was Marriage Enrichment Ministries. Longer version really is leading churches in their implementation of Marriage Enrichment Ministries. And if you look at the role of community marriage initiatives, there's really three scopes of the project that we lay out. And the first one is planting, nurturing, and developing marriage ministries at local churches. And we're to be that catalyst organization. So it really empowers them to do that across all the ages and stages of the marital life cycle. So I want to talk about what that might look like. And I'm going to use a little bit of a case study and just share the approach that we're taking currently in Bay County. And this was a topic of one of our monthly meetings back in September of this year. And along those lines, I'm going to just share the agenda that we put out for that particular meeting. And so this is the agenda of our December 15th meeting. And I just kind of want to highlight a couple things. So first of all, we are having these meetings on the third Thursday of every month. And we typically lay out a pretty detailed agenda. When I say detailed, I mean it's like minute by minute. And so, it starts at noon, and Ted, welcome, opening prayer and blessing. Then notice 12:02 to 12:10, everyone picks up food and begins eating. 12:10 to 12:15, Ted or Mary, everyone introduce themselves using a specific format of their name, their church organization, and their role at title or organization. So 5 minutes to do that. And then you'll notice that we have it at 1:25 to 1:30, end with next steps. So one of our slogans, we want to begin our meetings on time, we want to end our meetings on time. And so especially during the first 4 of these meetings we literally laid out this kind of detailed agenda that let people know that we're serious, that we know what we're talking about, and we've got a plan, and that we'll follow it. And one of our ongoing jokes, really, and it's interesting, we had a meeting yesterday on troubled marriages, was, we ended like right at 1:30. So I think just a sign of professionalism and of respect, and that we know what we're doing. We know where we're going. And so, and at the end of it, we talk about next steps. We lay out then is what the next meetings are going to be. For example, and this one was January 12th, there'd be a steering committee, deeper discussion of community marriage initiatives, et cetera. So again, you're sending a signal that says, hey, we know where we're going. This is where we're going. Please, join us in this activity. All right. And then from a content standpoint, so we want to start the content of each of our meetings right at 12:15, and we want to end them at 1:25. So we've got 5 minutes for closure. And in this particular one, we had 2 main sections. So section 1 was a recap and a deeper dive from our previous 2 meetings. Now, this was actually our third monthly meeting that we had. So we're still kind of getting in the cadence of it, and different people were showing up at various meetings. And so we wanted to recap what had been covered, but then go deeper in some of the sections in it as well. And so I'm going to take you through the actual PowerPoints we presented, but I wanted to provide this overview and context first. And so we start with Ted did a 15-minute presentation on why marriage matters to Bay County churches. And I think that's important to be, especially at the beginning, if you're launching this, and I realize that different ones of us are different stages of this, but having said that, our first funding was only a year ago. So none of us are particularly long in the tooth at this. And so it's important to reinforce, like, why is marriage important? Why does it matter to Bay County churches? And then I spoke for about 10 minutes on what a community marriage initiative is, because that's still getting people comfortable with that. And then went into a discussion of balance between vision, skills, and support. Because if you look at the languaging, even from the RFP, we say that, matter of fact, I'm going to switch back to that again, to another section on the RFP, because it conceptualizes what we're trying to accomplish. On the first page of the RFP, we say the main components of the approach that was taken in Jacksonville is to empower local churches to implement highly effective, self-sustaining marriage ministries balanced across the 3 areas of vision, skills, and support. across all the ages and stages of the marital life cycle. And so, of course, today, marriage enrichment is the part of the marital life cycle we are providing. But we want to be looking at that balance between vision, skills, and support. But that concept of balance between vision, skills, and support is foreign to most people. And so we need to teach it, and we need to reemphasize it, and then use that as a concept. And so we talk about it again in this particular meeting. Let me go back to the agenda. All right. And then we got into actual marriage enrichment ministries, where Logan's on the meeting with us, gave a 15-minute presentation on 5 different principles and themes that are important when looking at the area of marriage ministries. And then Ted and I, for another 15 minutes, really talked about various types of marriage enrichment programs. And so that's where we're going to go today. We're going to walk through this, and we want to kind of look at the contextual issues, but then go into the issues of marriage and enrichment ministries in particular. So that's where we're going. Okay, and so what I've basically done is these are the slides that I actually presented to people, or that were presented to people on that particular meeting on December 15th. So an overview of the agenda. They had the agenda in front of them as well, so they knew where we were going. And then, so the first one is why marriage matters to Bay County churches. And so when we do that, we talk about Northwest Florida divorce rate. And each of you, part of your grant application was to identify what is your county's divorce rate, and then how does that compare? And so that's one of the things we keep kind of going back to. And so in Bay County happens to be the 3rd highest divorce rate county in Florida. And remember, in these meetings, you don't always have the same people coming back 100% each time. And so you'll have new people. So it's important to kind of reinforce some things. Now, you'll want to do it quickly so they don't think that they're wasting all their time hearing something they've heard before. But it's important to be reinforcing some of the important things, like, so does your community have a high divorce rate? If so, please share on it. What are some of the social issues impacted by marriage or divorce? And this is a slide, to be honest with you, I've used probably a dozen times at least, where it just lists, like, this is where the research shows all the areas that are impacted by marriage and divorce. And most people care about quite a few of these things. And so the idea is marriage is the one area you can be pulling that's going to have a ripple effect across a wide range of social issues. And I typically name off a few of them when I'm presenting this. I'm not going to do it now for time's sake. But then we're talking about churches. We know that churches are, so now we ask, well, why marriage matters to churches, particularly in Bay County. And so these are a few slides that actually came from J.P. DeGance, from their program, their project, Communio. And the first one shows a bar chart that I think most church people are very familiar with, is that millennials have a significantly higher unaffiliated religious population. That when you compare to other generations, millennials are 43% unaffiliated compared to 22% for boomers and 30% for Gen X's. And so I think people in the church community are familiar with that. But the next slide is somewhat kind of a surprise to many of them, which is that, guess what? All generations attend church regularly at just about the same rate if their parents are married. So if they're married, millennials, 32% attend church. If the parents are married, 32% versus 35% for boomers or Gen X's. So the message is, guess what, guys? If you're concerned about your millennials, you're concerned about your youth, you're concerned about, then where you put your emphasis is on marriage. So this is another core message on why it is that marriage is so important to churches. Okay, and another of significance, and you'll notice my heading on all of them is why marriage matters to churches in Bay County. Again, I'm talking to Bay County, so we're bringing it back to Bay County. Each of you would be encouraged to do the same. Is why does it marriage matter in your community? And that is a millennial with married parents is 78% more likely to go to church than a millennial with unmarried parents or from a non-intact family. And that in fact, 73% of all adults in pews under the age 60 come from intact married families. So guess what, guys? If you care about church attendance, if you care about salvation, if you care about the size of your church, you should be caring about marriage. Okay. Now, I have a disclaimer. We did these sets of slides every meeting for the first 3 meetings. And now we no longer do them at each meeting because we don't want to be, it seems like we've, beating a dead horse. But these are slides that really I encourage all of you ought to have in your arsenal. And I'll be happy to share these with Stephanie, the PowerPoints that she can distribute to anybody who would like it. And feel free to just modify it. I mean, just put your own county in there for each of them. And so part of this comes from, we want to get into the world of our pastors. We want to get into the world of the churches so that it's their understanding, like why this is important to us. Okay. All right. And then we talk about what are some of the benefits to churches that have marriage ministries? How does it benefit them? Well, so I'm just going to read through the bullets. And again, you'll be able to go deeper in when you're presenting it, but it's the long-term health of the church. You've all heard the slogan, right? As goes the family, so goes the church. So goes the family, so goes the church, so goes the community, so goes the country. It's all about the family. The second is you improve church staff functioning, because guess what? The same skills that we teach in marriage education or in marriage programming work in all relationships. And so it's a way that your church staff can work better together. The third is we really operationalize the gospel by teaching people how to love one another. Think about it. What's the core message of the gospel? Well, that is that love God with your whole heart, whole mind and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. As a matter of fact, I would argue that the core gospel message is love one another. And we teach couples how to love one another. So we actually teach people how to put into practice the most important part of the gospel. So we're operationalizing the gospel. The next is that it teaches people how to meet people's core needs. Let's face it, relationship is one of people's strongest core needs, especially intimate relationship. And especially if you're in an area with a high divorce rate, guess what? That you've got a lot of people that are in relational pain. We want our churches to be that place where the people can turn to and know that their marriages will be safe and cared for. If you think about how Jesus ministered when he was on earth, he'd come up to somebody and so let's say it's somebody who was blind. The first thing he did is we healed their blindness. Or if they were lame, he allowed them to walk. Step one is he met their felt core needs. Step two pointed to the Father. And that's what we as church can do as well. Meet people's core needs and then point to the Father. The next bullet, it's a community outreach opportunity. Because you can reach out and just say, we're building strong marriages. And again, if you're in a high divorce rate, there's a lot of people in relational pain. So you kind of look at it and you say, wow, marriages are falling apart. Good news, bad news. Well, yes, there's a lot of bad news, but the good news is it really is a tremendous community outreach opportunity for our churches that are serving in it. So what's the end result of the whole thing for churches? You get you have increased church attendance, better church functioning, and increased giving. So it's a real win to churches. All right, so that's benefits to churches on the whole thing. The next thing we then talk about is we come alongside the churches. We're talking about marriage enrichment ministry because that's what our pastors said was important to them. Now, many of you, actually, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. If you recall, when you completed your application for the CMI fund, we ask you to ask the churches to let them tell you, to rate each of these 10 areas in the area of what are their needs of their congregation. So we ask them up here, congregation lead, based upon the makeup of our organization. Do we have a high, medium, or low need? What's our assessment of the current program offerings in the area? Do we have high, medium, or low? And then based upon that, what's their level of interest and motivation to add, expand? Is it high, medium, or low? Well, guess what, guys? When you did that, you basically did a community needs assessment of your churches. So you now have the ability to turn around and report back to them, hey, this is what you guys said you need, what was important to you. So we had 16 churches fill out this assessment form. Now, we actually had them do that at our first meeting that we had in September 15th. And there were like 30 people there, but only 16 of them were pastors or senior pastors. So we took the senior most representative of each church that was in attendance and used their results and looked specifically at that third part, which is their level of motivation to be doing something. And the way we scored it is if they gave it a low score, so we scored, the scale we used is from a scale of 0 to 2. And so if they gave it a low level of interest and motivation, then we said, okay, we score that as a 0. If you scored a medium, we scored that as a 1. You said it was a high level motivation, then we gave you 2 points. And so this table basically shows in rank order how the people in the pastors in Bay County shared what was their importance to them. And guess what? Marriage enrichment was the highest importance to them. And in fact, of the 16 pastors that filled out the survey, 2 of them said it was a medium importance, but 14 said it was of high importance. And so what we're now reporting is, and so their average score was 1.9 out of 2, which is a high level of desire and motivation. What we then did, the next slide shows, is we said, well, then what we're going to do is we're going to be scheduling our meetings in the order of your scores so that, since marriage enrichment was the most important, we're going to spend two months working on that one or sharing with you. And then we said marriage restoration for troubled couples, that was nearly as high. So we're going to do February and March. And then parenting was also high. So we'll do that in April and May. So in other words, what we're doing is we're not saying the marriage enrichment is vitally important churches. What we're basically saying is, hey, you churches said that it's vitally important. Therefore, we want to be serving you in that area. Does that make sense from a positioning standpoint? So what it allows us to be is in that role of a consultant to churches rather than a salesperson to churches. So we're basically asking them what it is that they wanted. And by the way, you have that information for all of your churches. You say, okay, this is what you say is important. Let us come alongside you and help you. Let us serve you in that way. And so that's how that is structured. Okay. And then we then, again, this was one of our earlier meetings. So we then talk about what is a community marriage initiative? What's that model look like? And so these are the 3 components of a community marriage initiative: increased supply, increased demand, and a website clearinghouse. And we introduced the concept under increased supply that there's really 2 approaches. One is that an organization can provide direct delivery of high quality skill-based programs. And the second part is what the churches can do, planting marriage ministries and programs. And this is languaging right out of the RFP, and this is something that I really encourage each of you to kind of get used to saying these kind of languaging around, is we empower local churches or organizations to implement highly effective, self-sustaining marriage ministries and programs balanced between vision, skills, and support across all the ages and stages of the marital life cycle. And then be prepared to unpack that. Well, what does that mean? Well, the second or the last part about all the ages and stages of the marital life cycle, well, those were the 10 marriage and family ministry areas that we looked at on the survey. Those are your ages and stages. And on Form E1, it's listed in kind of developmental stage, but in the slide I do, it's based upon what their order is. All right. So now we want to talk about what do we mean by vision, skills, and support. And we talk about that they should be balanced between vision, skills, and support. But most people that you'll be working with really won't know what that means, or won't really know really what do we mean when we talk about vision, skills, and support, and what happens if it's not balanced. Again, so this is part of an educational process that needs to be included, especially in some of your earlier meetings, with folks. Okay. And so we now look at each of the areas of vision, skills, and support. Now, on vision, we talk about what are God's plans and teachings for marriage. And we list 7 of them here as examples of things that really in any Christian church, they will resonate with, that love one another. And that should be an unconditional love, the importance of indissolubility of marriage, covenant versus contract, the importance of mutual submission, the importance of forgiveness, of leaving and cleaving. And most of the time in talking with churches, you don't necessarily need to go into detail on these. Most of the time, the pastor just nod on their head, yep, this is important. Yes, we believe this is important. And we do want the churches to be teaching on this and preaching on vision. And this is actually the easiest one for most pastors to resonate with. Oh, yeah, that's important. Okay. Well, that's the vision piece. The next piece is the skills. And so here's a list of about 15 different skills items that are taught in various marriage enrichment or marriage preparation or ministry for troubled marriages. This is the how to do it. This is the implementation. So how do you speak effectively so that you're heard? How do you listen effectively to truly understand your spouse? How do you show your spouse specifically how you appreciate them? How to apologize and ask for forgiveness, and how to forgive others? How to resolve conflicts? And so these are, I think we've got listed, what is it, 7, close to 20 different areas. And it's important because I think this kind of gives the kind of where the rubber meets the road. Like, okay, so these, when we talk about a skills-based program, these are the type of skills that we're talking about. But I want to make a distinction here between talking about skills and teaching skills, because a number of vision type programs will have a section on communication, for example, where it's just kind of fill in the blank. You say, oh, we talk about communications. Well, there's a huge difference between talking about communications and teaching communications. And an analogy I'll use is, let's say football. Let's say you've got a teenage kid or he wants to learn to do football. Well, is the way you teach them how to do football is every Sunday we watch NFL together, and at the end of the season, he's ready to join the NFL? Well, probably not. Just watching it, it's to do it. And so we developed a 6-step model for teaching skills that's really available for any skill that you're taught. So if you think about, how do you learn to drive? How do you learn to do any skill? It's this kind of a model. Step 1 is you present the theory behind the skill. Step 2, you provide step-by-step instructions on teaching the skill. Step 3 is you demonstrate, that is, you model the skill so they can see what it looks like. Step 4 is you process the demo. Like, okay, did that make sense? Do you have any questions? What did you see? Step 5 is really important, is the participants actually practice the skill. And then the instructor observes the practice and gives feedback. So that's a form of coaching. And then you process the practice. Like, well, what did you see? And that's an opportunity to go deeper and teach it. And so I think it's important that we explain what a 6-step model is, because in skills programs, just about every skills program I've seen uses this approach. Is you talk about the theory, you give instructions, you demonstrate it, you let them practice, you give feedback, and you process it. And so the question is that happening? And most marriage programs don't have it, or I should say most Most church-based marriage programs don't have that. So this is an opportunity where we can add the skills component into it. All right. All right. And then support. Examples of support are things like skills coaches. They can be in class or by phone or by Zoom. Providing mentors provides support. Small groups can be a support. Aftercare programs, even initial contact for couples that are in crisis, and the ability to have knowledge of other resources available and point to them. These are the support piece that you want to have. I don't want to look to say, okay, well, what happens in an unbalanced environment if you don't have all three areas of it? And so what happens if you only have one dimension? Well, if you only have vision, so on each of these, I've got the vision, a column on vision, a column on skills, a column on support. Then the last is, what is the unintended consequences if you're in that environment? Well, if you only have vision, your couples are likely to get frustrated and discouraged because they says, we can't live up to the ideal. And we see the ideal, we can't live up to it. And oftentimes the thing is, well, I guess maybe I'm just married to the wrong person because we can't get there. Now, if you only have skills by themselves, they just won't get used. It's like if you buy a toolkit from the hardware store, you can have skills, but they won't be used because you don't have the motivation that vision provides. You won't have the encouragement that support provides. If you only have the support without the vision or the skills, you have a marriage that's really what I call unhappy endurance. Okay, they may stuff it out, they may tough it out, but it's not a long-term solution. So let's now look to say, what happens if you add in the second component on each? Well, if you have a second component on each, so if you have vision and skills but no support, you're likely to have a start strong. They'll be motivated, they'll know how to do it, but then it's likely to fade because typically they won't have the follow-through to put it in place. If you only have the second one, the vision and the support without the skills, you're back in unhappy endurance. You'll tough it out. The marriage may last, but it won't be happy. I call these the white knuckle marriages. Like, okay, we're gonna stay until death does do it part, till death do us part. And man, I hope that's soon. Okay, that's not what God wants. Now, if you just have skills and support without the vision, that's hard for couples to maintain over the long term. And the line from Proverbs is, where there is no vision, the people perish. So that vision, God's plan for marriage, is that North Star to keep people motivated. So really important, I think, to understand the importance of all three of these. It's important for each of you to understand the importance and to be able to communicate that to everybody. All right, so that was the first half of the meeting, basically, is providing that context. And then we went into the part of this, let's talk specifically about marriage enrichment. Okay. And in that, Logan was the presenter at this time, and he laid out 5 core key concepts that we want churches to be aware of as they're thinking about implementing marriage ministries. All right. The first one is, it's extremely important to normalize marriage enrichment. That's something that every couple does on an ongoing basis. I'm now going to tell you the one thing you can do to sabotage marriage ministry, the one thing you can do that will basically almost guarantee that your marriage ministry at a church will fail. And that is when you launch a marriage ministry, you say, okay, we're launching this program. So if you're struggling in your marriage, make sure you come. Please attend this class for struggling marriages. Not only have you just killed that particular program, you have probably just killed marriage ministry at your church for at least the next year or two until people have forgotten it. Okay. Because you've created an environment of stigmatization. Instead, you want to flip it around completely. You want to normalize marriage enrichment. And one of the models you can say is, you talk about the importance of regular maintenance. And you can say things like, and I'll oftentimes ask the question that says, well, how many people in the room have a car? And they raise their hand. I say, okay, how many of you have changed the oil in your car? If you've at least once, if you've owned your car for 7 years, have you changed the oil in your car at least once in the last 7 years? And everyone raise their hands. It's like, well, why do you change the oil in your car? Well, and the answer is because the car won't work without oil being changed. He said, well, let me ask you this. How many of you go to a dentist, have gone to the dentist in the last 2 or 3 years, at least once? And everybody raises their hands. They said, well, would you plant a garden and not water it? So here's kind of a key thing to think about. I used to be amazed and really disappointed at a 50% divorce rate in America. But when I now realize how little attention most people provide to the marriage in terms of not going to ongoing marriage enrichment, I'm actually kind of amazed that 50% of marriages make it. Because think about it. Would 50% of cars last if you never changed the oil? I mean, what about the teeth in our kids' mouths if they never brushed their teeth or never went to the dentist? How would our gardens do if we never watered or weeded it? And so when you think about it within that context, it's kind of amazing that any marriages survive. And so we need to normalize it to say, just like you'll change the oil in your car and brush your teeth and go to a dentist and fertilize your garden or mow your lawn. So invest in your marriage every year. And so one of the slogans that we have out of that is every couple every year. And that we encourage every couple to go through a marriage enrichment program each and every year of their married life together. So that's the first of the 5 important principles around the area of marriage enrichment. That is, you want to normalize marriage enrichment as something that everybody ought to do. And within that same context, another way to look at it is look at marriage enrichment as a relationship health club. It's not something it's not an ICU unit or an emergency room. No, marriage enrichment is a relationship health club. We do it just to stay in shape. All right. The next core principle is the importance of pastoral participation in your marriage enrichment ministry programs. And this is a video, I'm not going to take the time to play it here, where it's a senior pastor that talks about his participation in one of the marriage programs. And so if you really look at it, the ideal thing is to have your senior pastor go through a marriage enrichment program and then report back to say, wow, I went through it and it was just really amazing. And in fact, here in Bay County, the most successful churches in terms of penetration have been those where the senior pastor has gone through the program and comes back and says, yeah. And so we've got one in particular, North Star Church, where Pastor Marty and his wife Angela went through it. As a matter of fact, they allowed for Ted Randall, who's their part-time marriage pastor, to give a marriage homily as part of their Sunday service. He gave the whole homily about the importance of marriage. And then he announces, we've got this class coming up. And then the senior pastor said, yes, Angie and I are going. And not only are we going, our entire small group is going. And so we had the largest participation in the class from that particular church. So you're normalizing it. You're showing the importance of the pastors participating in it. All right. Next key concept is recruiting volunteers. And again, this is a classic mistake that many churches do when launching a marriage ministry, is they'll put out a global announcement that says, hey, we're doing a marriage ministry. We need volunteers. If you're interested, please reach out to us. And what I propose instead is reach out to your prospective volunteers in a church on a one-on-one basis. Now, you've got a picture of Jesus there, because you think about it, that's how Jesus recruited his apostles. It was one at a time, by name. It was Peter, come follow me. John, come follow me. Notice Jesus didn't put up a flyer on a tree trunk, post it and say, if you're interested in becoming apostle of the Messiah, please email, text, or voicemail me, or meet at this place. No, it was one-on-one. And so where the coaching on that is get with the pastor and say, hey, just can you provide, so where the encouragement is pastor, let's develop a list of, 6 to 10 to 12 people that are in a reasonable, healthy marriage. And could you either reach out to them, or is there somebody on your staff that can reach out to them? Okay. And invite them to a meeting. So you want to invite them to a meeting at that church where they're going to learn more about marriage ministry. So that's that individual invitation on it. And where the invitation, then either the senior pastor can send an email that says, hey, but actually it's really going to be more direct, even if it's not an email from the pastor, just like at a service to say, we've got a meeting come up, would you attend? Would you come? Okay. Or make a phone call. Or if he's too busy to it, then have him delegate somebody who's already passionate about marriage in that church to say, okay. And then that person can say, hey, Pastor so-and-so encouraged me to reach out to you. Okay. All right. Next one, I want to talk about the topic of childcare. And this is really kind of a question of how important is childcare? And let me just frame it this way. Childcare is not unimportant. Okay. It is a important part. But it's not, I kind of want to walk a line here. Okay. I don't want to, because I want to be saying two things. I want to say childcare is important to encourage participation. On the other hand, if you're not able to provide childcare, that doesn't mean that you cannot do marriage ministry. It just means your attendance is not going to be that great, But since you really want to be serving the couples that have kids, that's where our heart really is. Providing some sort of childcare is very beneficial. It's advisable if you can pull it off. Okay. Next main theme is you want to integrate marriage teachings into the existing rhythm of a church. And there's two ways to look at doing that. One way to do that is through their sermon cycle, and where you're encouraging the pastors to say, integrate a pro-marriage teaching into a number of your sermons. And if you look at vision, skills, and support, one of the places where vision can really come into play is in the church, in your sermons, in the sermons, because you want to be sending a signal that it's vitally important. And you can, and so my own church, for example, when we were getting ready to be promoting something that was happening at a community level, I got his permission that I would be doing a pulpit talk at the end of the service. But during the service, he gave a strong pro-marriage message in it. And in it, he said, if any of you are struggling in your marriage, please feel free to reach out to me, the pastor. And I can give referrals to other resources. Now, by the way, I had already sent him an email that says, by the way, here's 5 resources you can refer people to. So he felt equipped in it. He says, if you're struggling with your marriage, reach out to me. I'll be happy to meet with you. And so you want to be sending that message from the pulpit that marriage is important, that you want to be as a resource. Then you want to be equipping the pastors to be able to deliver that as well. All right. Then the other place where existing rhythm can come into play is in small groups. If your church is already running small groups, then look at marriage ministry in a small group area. When I first got involved in the field of marriage ministries, I focused a lot on content, and I focused a lot, got to pay attention to which curriculum have the strongest material. Kind of shifted a lot in that. I now realize it's equally important is what program has a format that's going to match with the format that's already happening at a church, because it's going to be much easier to if you come in alignment with that church format, than the content. So that's what we're talking about, integrated into the existing rhythms that are occurring in a particular church. All right. So now I want to look at 3 particular types of programs. Okay. The 3 types I want to talk about is date nights, teach out of the box programs, and then a very high level overview of 3 specific enrichment programs. And I say that we want to start with date nights because there's a number of people who think that, okay, starting with date nights might be the easiest way to get started. And so I want to look at kind of the pros and cons of date nights. So first of all, the pros of date nights is they're an easy ask for participants. It's non-stigmatizing with it. So it's easy to say, hey, we're going to do date night on such and such a date, come with your spouse. So those are the pros. And the third part is you can create a captive audience to pitch more in-depth marriage programs. And so there are some pros on it, but I do want to point out some cons on it as well. The first one is there's typically not a lot of substance to date night programs. So if you have a marriage ministry that's putting too great an emphasis on date nights, truthfully, you're unlikely to create lasting change in couples. You're just not. And the second is, honestly, it can require a large amount of logistics and planning. When you look at the food, if you're doing a dinner or decorations or RSVPs and cleanup, entertainment, it can be exhausting. And the third, there is cost involved in it. Okay. So what you want to be careful is a church who says, oh yeah, we have a marriage ministry. We have a Valentine's Day banquet every year. Well, that's not a marriage ministry. That's a Valentine's Day banquet. And so your ideal positioning, and that's what it says at the bottom left here, is that it's a theater for more in-depth programming. And that takes advantage of the fact that it's a captive audience to be able to pitch more in-depth marriage programs. But I'll say this, if all you plan to do with date nights is date nights, I would say don't waste your time, because it'll be a feel-good type of thing that burns up a lot of manpower, but really doesn't accomplish much. So if you do it, make sure it's part of a bigger strategy. So that's date nights. So useful if positioned correctly. Second thing we want to talk about is teach out of the box program. So what I mean a teach out of the box program is a program that is, you can call it plug and play. Something, we used to call it teach out of the box because they were typically DVDs and participants in a box. You'd plug in the DVD, and now many of them are streamed. All right. But the point on it is that you don't need facilitator training on it. And so that's the first bullet. Easy to implement, plug and play. Facilitator does not need to be trained on the content usually. And in fact, it really doesn't matter too much which of the pre-screen programs you choose. Now, what I mean by that is, what I recommend is that you as the CMI identify, 3 or 4 or half a dozen teach out of the box programs that you feel comfortable in, and you say, hey, these have been pre-screened. We feel good about it. And honestly, once you've met that pre-screening, you don't really care which of the 6. And that is the next bullet. It's easy to rotate the program each year. So you can run one year and a second one the next year. And then the last pro on is that they will typically fit into your existing disciples structure. If you're doing like a weekly thing. So it's easy to kind of plug them in. The cons are significant is it's really not clear. The data is mixed. It's just not clear how much lasting impact any one of those programs will have. But it's great if you can rotate the programs over the years. And so if you look at the ideal positioning at the bottom right on it, really the ideal positioning on teach out of the box programs is you rotate the teach out of the box programs each year, and you offer them multiple times during the year so that people will have different opportunities. And then you're sending that message. You encourage every married couple to participate in the program each year with that slogan of every couple every year. So it would be to say, hey, last year we ran a particular program. And so here's when I talk about some pre-screen programs here in Bay County, for example, these are examples that we promote all of these. Art of Marriage by Family Life, Vertical Marriage by Family Life, 5 Love Language by Gary Chapman, Cherished by Gary Thomas. And by the way, there are literally dozens of teach out of the box programs. But you have to be careful. If you go to a church and say, oh, there's dozens, whatever you want, you now make it hard for them to choose because there's so many resources. So instead, what I suggest is having a smaller set to say, hey, these are pre-screened, these are excellent. And honestly, whichever one you want to start with would be great. And the idea on it is, okay, run one program this year, encourage all your couples to go through it. And then next year, run a different program, encourage all your couples to go through it. And so you don't really need to get too hung up on what sequence or which one you're running. So I wanted to talk about, different categories of programs. So the first category was date night. The second category was teach out of the box. The third, we said specific programs. All right. And so we introduced at this point in the meeting 3 specific marriage enrichment programs that we said we think these have particular value that we want to go into at a deeper level. But we said from time constraints, we knew going into it that we'd be able to cover about this much material and content that we in the time that we had. We said we'll give you a very high level overview of these 3, why we think they're each great. But then in our next meeting, we'll go into more detail. And so now we've already introduced the concept and talked about vision, skills, and support. And so when we look at each of these 3, we're rating them on those 3 areas of vision, skills, and support. And what we say is, for example, Adventures in Marriage, if you're teaching the secular version of it, it's relatively low in vision. If you're teaching the Christian version, it's going to be higher. So that'd be close to a 7 on vision. Very high on skills and decent on support. Grace Marriage is an excellent program. Very high on vision, an 8 on vision, a 5 on skills, and an 8 on support. Re-engage, they have to have 2 models of it. There's an ongoing version, and then there's a semester program. If it's an ongoing version, I rate it as a 10 on vision, excellent on vision. Purposely, it's low on skills, but it's strong on support. The ongoing version is strong on support. If it's a semester model, I'll drop that to a 7. Okay. And so we had time in that meeting where I was able to provide a little bit more detail upon on each of these descriptions. For time's sake, to give Carl a couple of minutes, or at least questions and answer, I'm going to pause at this point and see where we go.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dennis. We always appreciate your words of wisdom and hearing you speak. And as always, this was so valuable today. So thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. I do want to wrap up today's event by giving you guys a sneak peek before we go into Q&A, a sneak peek of our June event. In June, our event is going to be titled Strengthening Communities, Equipping Churches to Launch Marriage Ministries. And this will include a very informative talk by our very own Carl Caton, as well as a masterclass on strategic ways to connect with leaders and organizations in your community by Jerry and Kate Angelo of Greene County, Missouri. And Jerry and Kate, they just have a wealth of information on this topic. It's so many creative ideas, and we know that you're going to find it really informative and helpful. So we're going to do a Q&A so that we can get all of your questions for Dennis. And we understand that maybe not everybody's able to stay. So if you need to hop off, that's totally fine. We will be posting the entire training video on our YouTube page, so you can watch there any part that you've missed. So what we'll do for the Q&A, if you could just raise your virtual hand on your screen. At the bottom of your screen, it should say reactions. And then if you click that reactions, you're going to see some emojis. And then just under the emojis, it says raise hand. So if you'll raise that virtual hand, I'll go around the room and we'll try to get to everyone's questions today. All right. All right. And it looks like we have a question from Tom.
Yes, Dennis, thank you very much. Very good job. I had a question. You talked about the model for teaching skills, and then you said there really weren't a lot of good programs out there, or a lot of the marriage programs weren't good at that. And then you talked about out of the box programs. I'm just curious how those dovetail. I mean, do we try to get a list of the ones that are good? It doesn't seem practical for most of us to try to teach people how to teach skills. I mean, that's probably not where a lot of us are trained or experienced. And I'm just curious how you would approach that and the interface between the model for teaching skills you outlined, but also specific programs, out of the box programs, which may not be as effective.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. And that's, I think, an important distinction is the teach out of the box programs, their strength really is on the vision side. They're not on the skill side. And so what I really encourage is that every community marriage initiative choose a skills-based program to standardize on. And that my suggestion is that oftentimes, so when you look at the one slide, let me go back, let me share screen for a sec. Yeah, so when we look at this slide, we talk about two approaches for delivering content. We say the first part is direct delivery of high quality skill-based programs. That's on one side, and the other side is we empower the local church and organization to implement highly effective self-sustaining marriage ministries and programs. And so I get it, Tom, that many of your organizations right now, when you're starting off, probably don't have the ability to be teaching the skills. And my response is that's a skill set that really needs to be developed in my view as part of rolling out a community marriage initiative. And you really can't count on the teach out of the box programs to be delivering a decent job of teaching skills. I've never seen a teach out of the box program that did a great job of teaching skills. Yeah.
So,
Sorry, there we go. Yeah, thanks for taking the question. I like the presentation a lot. The recommendation to have them rotate programs, I like that. I'm wondering how that works practically. If the goal is to equip churches to run a sustainable program where maybe they've developed a leadership team that understands the curriculum, can deliver the curriculum competently. How do you do that with the rotating set of curriculum? Like what do you envision there?
Yeah, and so again, where I'm looking at it is that in a community, you're likely to standardize on one or two skills-based programs, and you're going to have that same curriculum be running in the community on an ongoing basis, readily available. Then you supplement that with various teach out of the box programs run at various churches. And then you have all of that listed on your community marriage resource website, your website clearinghouse, where all of them are listed and available. And so when you're looking at a teach out of the box program, if you've led Art of Marriage, you can lead Love Languages, or you could lead Cherish. I mean, that's the point on the teach out of the box, is that you don't need specialized training on it. Now, you want to have general training about facilitation skills, but that's in using a tube, teach out of the box. That's just, how do you ask questions? How do you facilitate a conversation? How do you make sure that one person doesn't monopolize the discussion? That's a much lower skill set than it is of teaching skills on how to do the 20 things on the list of skills.
Like in our case, we got equipped in Adventures in Marriage. So we would have that, but then you're recommending to add a couple other teach out of the box sets, or bring in another team who's already got that competency.
Yeah, and so there's a distinction. So Adventures in Marriage is not a teach out of the box program. So that's a skills-based program that's facilitator led. And so you'll you'll come in now. Let's take San Antonio for an example. Carl, how many couples are trained in Adventures in Marriage in San Antonio? How many
I think
couples?
6 or 7 couples.
Yeah, so 6 or 7 couples, and they've offered Adventures in Marriage at, I don't know, is it half a dozen churches at this point, Carl, or close to it? You know, and so it doesn't make sense in my view, Saul, to be and by the way, I got to tell you is my thinking on this has shifted over the years. When I started this, I used to think is we're going to go into a church, we're going to equip a church so that they are equipped to be able to offer, say, Adventures in Marriage to their people. The challenge with that is you don't get really great at teaching a skills-based program, whether it's Adventures in Marriage or Mastering the Mysteries of Love or any of them, until you've taught it 2 or 3 times, okay? But in most churches, once you've taught a curriculum 2 or 3 times, you've served most of the people that are interested in receiving that particular curriculum. So just at a time when you've got a team really great at teaching this curriculum, you no longer have an audience base for them. Okay, so my thinking has shifted to say on the skills-based program, have that be a community resource where, like they're doing in San Antonio, that says let's have this group of 6 or couples that will team teach, and what's nice about that is that they then become not only good teachers, they're coaches to provide the skills level coaching in the place as well. And the coaching is an important part of skills teaching. So it's just understanding the different competency level between a skills program, which is higher competency needed, higher training, more requirement for coaching, and guess what? Longer lasting impact on a couple than a teach out of box program that will make couples feel good and will inspire them, but haven't in most cases actually given them the skills to change behavior. And so it's not a matter that I'm saying one's better than the other. What I'm saying is do both. In a community, you got to do both. Because if you just did a skills program, guess what? You can't have a slogan of every couple every year, because there's no way in heck you can bring in a new skills program every year. You'll kill yourselves.
Just to clarify, it sounds like you are saying, yes, get the skills-based competency. It's going to take a while to nail that, but then in that same set of instructors, or add some additional instructors who are also competent in some teach out of the box programs that they can get online a lot quicker with.
I would say those are typically going to be different sets of instructors, is because the teach out of the box programs are so easy to do. You kind of don't want to be dragging down your higher skilled instructors with those programs. In fact, I'd almost flip it and say, look at the people that are doing teach out of the box programs in the churches and are passionate about it. Those are the ones that are your real marriage champions. Those are the ones you would invite to a facilitator training. But the culture you want to be creating in your community is that, yes, you're trained in this curriculum, and yes, you should do it in your own church, but serve generously the other churches as well, is the culture that I'm proposing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next question is Ben.
Are you going to send that PowerPoint out?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yes. So
And-
I will send it to Stephanie, and then Stephanie, if you want to send it to people, all
Yes.
of them, or when they ask, whatever you want to do on it, I'll send it to Stephanie.
Okay, sure. Next, we have a question from Carl.
I had known Dennis easily for 10 years and had heard him talk about the difference that skills-based training makes. And while I trusted his judgment on it, it wasn't until I experienced skills training that I saw the incredible difference that it is. So I really affirm, Dennis, what you're saying. It is a whole different world, and it does require a much more competent team. And so we support our Adventures in Marriage teams from the city level, because like you say, it's too much, it's too rigorous to have teams for each church, but we want to make it available for the city.
Now, by the way, if you have large mega churches, then I mean, I could see a model that in a community that's got large mega churches, that each mega church could be having their own set of Adventures in Marriage people, and you're running that on a, 3 or 4 times a year, absolutely. So that's kind of where I think I'd make the distinction, is on the size of the church. Boy, you certainly don't want to be burdening a small to medium-sized church with an expectation of you've got to develop that. So, and I'm also, in a minute, I'd like to hear from Ron McLean and Dave and Cheryl Belden, because they've been doing skills-based programs for quite a while in Fresno. So I'd like to hear their perspective on what I've said about skills programs, but I'll let Dave ask his question first.
I was wondering how quickly and easily in all of your training that you could come up with numbers for the vision, skills, and support for some of the other programs out there, like Christian Prep, for example. Is that something you'd be like, be able to give some numbers quickly, or does that take a little more thought and process to?
No, so Christian Prep, I would give Christian Prep probably about a 6.5 on vision. I'd give it a 7 on skills. And support depends upon your level of coaching that you're going to be providing on it. Mm-hmm. So I would, the way prep is actually mostly implemented, they don't have coaches. So if you don't have coaches, I'll give it a 3. Even with coaches, maybe a 5.
Yeah. Okay.
Is what I'd give to Christian Prep. And the reason I'm a little bit lower on the skills with them is that their core skill they teach is paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. Which is useful. It was originally designed for like a premarital program, is where prep was originally designed, and that's okay. But some of the other programs will go deeper with the skills, communication skills. But anyway.
So like a marriage mentoring program, the Dare to Be Different material, that would be a strong in support.
Yes.
And probably pretty strong in skills. Vision.
Again, I don't know the particular one, Dare to Be Different, so I can't kind of. I was able to respond to Christian Prep because I'm trained in Christian Prep.
Yeah. No, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Logan, before I go, I'd like to, before I call on you, or before Stephanie calls you, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear from Ron and Dave and Cheryl, your thoughts about what I've said about skills. Maybe I'll start with Ron, because you've been doing it for 20 years.
So we've been doing skills-based classes in Fresno County here since 2004. And we've done other classes as well. And I think there's some good things that can happen through general marriage education, inspirational type things. But we've seen change really happen long-term is teaching skills-based classes, which have all those. I think there were 5 components of a skills-based class, including long-term growth with coaches. And coaches are a big part of teaching a skills-based class, and then having follow-up as well for people that request it for more coaching or for additional classes. So yeah, and I think the Beldens can speak to this, but we have a skills-based class going on at least 9 months of the year in the community. So like at my church, we've taught what essentially is Mastering the Mysteries of Love, but we've got a new form of that. We taught that twice, and the third time we offered it, we didn't have as many people sign up because they'd say, oh, we already had that. So when people do contact us, the coalition, we say, well, there's 5 classes going on right now in different parts of the county that you can choose from. Go to our website, and thus the need for a website. Yeah.
Great. Dave and Cheryl, would you like to add anything to that or your perspective?
Yeah, I just really agree with everything that you talked about today, Dennis. It encourages us that we're on the right track too, but and also about just doing the classes, like teaching our basic skills class all year, and then the next year doing Adventures in Marriage, so that the couples do have something to go to every year. Because what's happened is we've done our marriage Mastering Mysteries of Love, which we've made into Marriage Works for so many years now, that the churches are saying, well, what else do you have? Because we've already done that. And so we were so thankful to be able to go to San Antonio last summer and be trained in Adventures in Marriage. And so now we've taught that 3 times. And one of the mega churches that we taught it, or that they actually attended our Adventures in Marriage at our church and said, hey, we want to take that to our church, so we want to be trained. And so, yeah. You have anything to say?
Yeah.
Skills are where it's at. We've been doing it for so many years, and people actually need to go to the class more than once. I mean, they're basic skills, and yet once they hear it, they start catching on, and it's over. So yeah, I right on with what you said.
Yeah.
That's where the behavior changes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And again, the analogy I use is if you're learning how to play sports, if you've got a kid and he wants to learn how to play baseball, you don't just say, well, let's just watch a lot of baseball games. Now I'll buy you a mitt. Now go join a team. No, on any sports, what do you do is, well, the learning occurs in the doingness. So let's say if you're learning how to play t-ball, you'll say, okay, put the ball on the tee and then take the bat and you swing it. You just wouldn't say to a kid, okay, well, here's the ball, there's the tee, here's the bat, call me when you've mastered that. You have to do step by step, every step in the way, like hold the bat like this. Are you holding the bat? Okay, now swing it like this. It's step by step. And so it is with communication skills. And so it is literally with every skill that we teach or learn in the society. I mean, I put this out there. Think about a skill that you now learn. Okay. If you learned it in a group setting, I would say it's highly likely that they followed that pattern. That's how it works. It's how behavior gets, changed. Logan, you'd raised your hand for a sec. I don't know if there's something you wanted to say. Or
yeah, and I would just reinforce what you say about the skills. We had that local churches. They did a video for us for their upcoming Adventures in Marriage class. They said, "Look, this ain't no sitting and getting." And I think that's what people are used to in a marriage program with vision-based programs. They're used to just sitting and getting like a sermon, anything else. You're with the skills, but you're getting in it. You're doing it. That's the difference, is the doing. But I will say, just to kind of peel into or get more granular about what you said with integrate the programs of the existing, since that was my thing, and I actually got this from Jason at Central Arkansas, to integrate it into the existing rhythms of your church. How do you do that in the small groups is if you've got really mature believers who can understand, when you're going through a Bible study, how to integrate the marriage element of that in the Bible study. That's really a powerful thing. And it reinforces to the church that marriage is what we're about as a church. This is a core value and brand in our church. So I really like that idea.
Looks like we have a question from Jim.
So I get the skill-based thing and agree with that. What I'm running in a little bit and just how do you address it is that, yes, we learn these skills, but most people reach a point where they go, okay, this is as good as I'm going to get at this. Whether it's, I got a bunch of friends that golf, and some of them, they've been golfing for 40 years and they're still taking lessons. But there's a whole bunch of guys that just go, you know what? I just want to go hang out on Saturday and I want to be with some other men. So I'm not going to spend $500 this year to go get golf lessons because the ROI, I guess, is what I'm looking at and trying to talk to some couples that have been to, Weekend to Remember or whatever, half a dozen times, and they're just like, yeah, we got it. We got this. So what kinds of things might you recommend to break through that resistance barrier?
Well, so a couple of things I'd respond to. So first of all, Weekend to Remember is an excellent example of a high vision, low skills program. They don't teach skills there. It's a great high vision program, and people walk out of there and they feel motivated, they feel convicted, they feel inspired. It's a great program. I mean, my wife and I went to it, our most recent one 6 months ago, but they don't teach skills. And so really what you're kind of saying is that they've got, you're talking about couples that have gone through a number of vision only programs and saying, well, gee, this isn't really making a difference for us. And I would say, yeah, Jim, that's right. And that's kind of what we're saying, is that vision by itself isn't enough. Now, the resources, as Carl said in his chat, the resources work together. And that's why we say it's got to be balanced between vision, skills, and support. And notice I put vision at the base of the triangle, because the base is, what is God's vision for your marriage? What is God calling you to do? That's vitally important. But then you've also got to do the how to do it. Yeah. And on your golf analogy, it would come to this is, like, for example, myself, I don't really care that much about golf to be investing in a golf lesson. I don't care. I'm hoping that people care more about their marriage, that they're willing to invest in their marriage. And that's where our job comes in, is we say, that's one of our advertising slogans is invest in what matters most, invest in your marriage. It does take an investment in your marriage. It just does. So that's part of the motivation, I think.
Jerry, did you have a question? I saw you had your hand raised.
Oh yeah, I kind of had a comment along the lines of what Carl's been putting in chat there, but we need to have a well-balanced marriage champion diet here, where we're doing date nights, where we're doing out of the boxes, and where we're doing skills. And I really appreciate, Dennis, you defining those things. We had been doing them and didn't realize we've been doing skills, we've been doing date nights, we've been doing out of the box. But when you define it the way that you did in that slide, it really brings a lot of clarity, and you can be more intentional in being balanced in those three areas. But I think you need all three, because you're going to catch people in different stages of life where they care about things in different ways, or maybe their heart's in a particular place. And, you're going to get the fun crowd at the date nights with hopefully an intention to be more purposeful in a skills-based or an out-of-the-box teaching or whatever. So I guess mainly I just wanted to bring a little light to, we need a well-balanced diet of all three, and you need to seek wisdom in how you implement them as a complete and total marriage ministry package for the local church.
Exactly. And this is how I introduced the whole concept on vision, skills, and support. It says marriage ministries and programs should be balanced. Now, I'll be honest with you, my original version of the lines, it used to say must be balanced. They must be balanced. And so I've softened it. You should be, but I do also want to make a clarification. I'm not saying that every marriage ministry program for every age and stage needs to be balanced. No, that's impossible. But instead, you want within a category there to be balance. And so you want to be, so that you want strong visions programs in addition to strong skills programs. I got to tell you, when you look at the exit surveys from the Art of Marriage program, it's off the charts. I mean, it's an excellent program from a vision standpoint. And so from a motivation standpoint, it's great. But now let's supplement that with the skills so they actually know how to do the things that they're now being called and inspired to do. So you're absolutely right, Jerry. Carl, you're absolutely right in your thing. They must be balanced. Yes. Balance is the key word.
So do we have
And
any?
the cultures of the different locations are going to be slightly different. One city is going to be different than the other. And so you have to be able to adapt to that need. So anyway, sorry.
Oh, no, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Did you have any other questions? Okay, well, this has been a great, very informative event, and I want to thank you all for being here, but that concludes our training for today. And once again, thank you to Dennis for providing this opportunity for us. And thank you all for coming. Don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do to support you, and everyone have a great weekend.